What's up guys, welcome to another video, and today we are back. We are talking about the DJI Osmo Action. Once again, not doing a video on this for a while, and it is time to do another one today. So on my previous DJI Osmo Action videos, I've had quite a few comments asking me what I do if I'm using this camera at night. What do you do if you're using this camera in low light situations? You're out and about, it gets dark and you still want to shoot some footage. What can you do to get good footage at night time, low light situations with the DJI Osmo Action? Well, hopefully we're going to answer that for you today. If you guys find this useful, you enjoy the video, I'm going to ask you guys to do me that usual favor, hit the like button. Helps me out loads and loads on my channel, and I really appreciate it. Think about subscribing if you haven't already. Loads of Osmo Action videos on my channel, loads more to come. Hopefully some Osmo Action 2 videos in the not so distant future. We will see. Hopefully that one's on the horizon. But anyway, let's get into some low light shooting with the Osmo Action. Now, the problem is, and the first thing to say I suppose, is that these types of cameras, the Osmo Action, GoPros, things like that, they are not really designed for nighttime, really low light situations. They do struggle, and there isn't really a huge amount that you can do to stop them from struggling. There are things you can do to make it better, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But if you intend on consistently shooting low light situations, then I would suggest that maybe it's worth looking at a different type of camera. But if you're out and about shooting and every now and again you find yourself in a low light situation and you still want to be able to shoot footage, well, here are some of the things that you can do. So look, first things first, I went outside in my back garden last night and I filmed a little bit of footage. And first of all, I just set the camera to auto, to fully auto, to see what type of footage we would get. So here we go, I'm going to show you that clip right now. So here I am guys, I'm sat in the back garden of my house late at night, it's like 10:15. I've got a little bit of light coming from the window just next to me here, but hardly much at all. You can see that the light is really low. So this is with the camera set in fully auto. So it's going through fully auto, it's decided the settings. I imagine it's going to have boosted the ISO right up, so we're probably shooting at ISO 3200, I would imagine. I'll put that on the screen so you guys can see. But this is the footage of me with the camera in fully automatic settings. So there you go, that is the fully automatic footage with the auto settings. Now, it's not too bad, but of course it does look very grainy and it does look a little bit underexposed. Now, the problem is, whenever you are shooting low light in auto with a camera like this, it will adjust the settings to get as much light as it possibly can. And you might have noticed on that clip, that meant that it moved the shutter speed to 1/25th of a second. The problem is that then goes below the 180 shutter rule. I was shooting in 24 frames per second, so ideally I wanted that shutter speed to be 1/50th of a second, or 1/48th ideally, but 1/50th of a second is normally where I would be for most of my cameras. We do that in order to maintain the right level of motion blur in your videos. If I move my hand like this, you can see a little bit of motion blur in my hand, kind of how it would look in real life. If you waved your hand in front of yourself, you can see it move a bit. And the problem is, if you go with a faster shutter speed, stuff doesn't have that right level of motion blur, and if you go with a slower shutter speed like we did in that auto clip, it can make things too blurry. Even the slightest bit of kind of slower movement still looks a little bit blurry, and we're trying to make it look as natural as we can. And that's the problem with the auto settings, that it will drop that to below the 180 rule to get as much light in as possible, and that then has the potential to kind of mess up the rest of your footage by making it too blurry. Okay, well, what can we do next? What's the next thing that we can do? Well, one of the biggest things that I always do whenever I'm going to have to shoot footage in low light or at night time with my Osmo Action is I make sure that I'm shooting in the D-Cine-like color profile in the Osmo Action. That is almost like the Osmo Action's flat color profile. The reason I do that is because when you're shooting in that type of flat color profile, it gives you a little bit more dynamic range and gives you much more ability to then play with that footage when you're editing it in post, or when you're adding a color grade to it. So let's just look at that footage right now and I'll show you how that footage looks. Here's the clip. Okay guys, so this is the footage that I've shot in the D-Cine-like color profile. So this is set up and filmed in the D-Cine-like color profile, and then of course I have edited it in post to get it looking just how I wanted it. So see what we think of this footage. Now you can see straight away it looks a lot better. That's because I had more ability to play with that footage with the editing process when I added the color grade. If I put that one and the first one side by side, you can see that there is definitely an improvement. There's definitely a difference and it looks better, even though it is still a little bit dark, and most importantly, it is still very grainy. That's because the ISO was right up to 3200 on this camera, and unfortunately if you're shooting ISO levels that high with the Osmo Action, it does look a little grainy. Personally though, I think people worry a little bit too much about grain. If you want to get good footage in low light, you'd rather have a brighter exposure and a bit more grain than hardly any grain, but you can't see the picture because it's so dark. So I think people worry a bit too much about grain. But there we go, we already had improvements just by shooting in the D-Cine-like color profile. And that then rolls into the next tip, right? And that is to learn how to edit footage, because the more you are using your footage in tougher situations, low light or really bright maybe even, the more that you have an ability to color grade it or edit that footage, the better it will look, because you will have more ability to improve it in post. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of editing skill. All you've got to really be able to do is tweak some of the levels, some highlights, some shadows, a little bit of exposure, a little bit of contrast maybe. You don't have to do anything massively complicated. You just want to learn the basics, but especially if you're shooting in a flat color profile, that will help you loads to then be able to get the best from that footage that you've shot. Okay, so the best thing that you can do if you're going to be shooting in low light or at night time with your Osmo Action is to use a light. Now that doesn't have to be massively complicated. I'm not suggesting you fit a huge softbox like I've got right here on top of your Osmo Action. You can use a tiny light. There's all different things you can do, and of course the easiest thing you can do is to use the light that pretty much all of us carry around every day in our pockets, and that is your phone. Use the light from your phone. So that's what I've done right here. I filmed a clip using the light from my phone. Here's that clip right now. Okay guys, and this is the footage with me using a light. Now actually I've just gone very simple. I'm using the light on my phone for this. I wanted to use that for the demonstration because that is the light that pretty much everybody is going to have right there in their pocket. Of course you could use some other different types of lights, but those are different options really depending on the setup that you've got. But this is the footage using the light. And there we go, you can see the difference that using a light makes, because the exposure is so much easier to get because you've got your light on yourself and you don't have to have the ISO level so high. You don't have to worry too much about that level of grain. The footage is just brighter because you're using a light. I literally shot that holding the camera in my hand and using the light from my phone. Really easy to do. If you want a more permanent rig, you can get lots of those like mini LED panel lights. I've actually linked a couple of different ones in the description below to make it easier for you guys. You get one of those, you get one of those mini little clamps, you put it on your stand with the clamp and the light next to it, and it can work really well. You can also get the lights that fit into the hot shoe on the top. If you get the cage for your Osmo Action, you can put your Osmo Action in the cage, and then you get the lights that fit in the cold shoe on the top. So you can get one of those as well to make it even easier for yourself, especially if you intend on then doing some kind of action sports or something with your camera and you want the light. You definitely want something that is secure. I wouldn't suggest holding your phone out there or using something on a little clamp. Probably best to get the one that fits securely into the cold shoe on top of the camera if you intend on using it for any kind of action whilst you're also using the light. Although I would imagine your chances of using it for action when it's dark are probably lower, and unfortunately that is the reason why these cameras are not really designed for low light nighttime shooting. So there you have it guys, we don't have any magical solution because as I said, these are just simply not the best cameras for using in that type of situation. But if you do have to, try those couple of tips, try those things, because it will help you to get better, brighter, more nicely exposed footage. If you did find it useful, I'm going to ask you guys to hit that like button for me. It helps me out loads and loads. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to see you guys on the next video.